Have you ever watched your cat sleeping peacefully, only to notice that she's still purring? If she's completely asleep, why is she making that sound? Is she dreaming, feeling safe, soothing herself? Or could something else be happening inside her body? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that little rumble means, and you might be surprised by a few things scientists have discovered about it. Before we can understand why cats purr in their sleep, we need to quickly understand what a purr actually is. Cats produce a purr through rapid contractions of muscles around the larynx, creating vibrations that continue as they breathe both in and out. That's what makes a purr different from a meow. It's not just an exhale sound. It's a continuous loop, in and out, over and over, sometimes for minutes at a time. That's really all the biology you need for now. What matters more is what's happening around that sound, especially when your cat is fast asleep. So why do cats purr while sleeping? This is the real question, and there isn't just one answer. There are several possible reasons cats may continue purring while they sleep. Let's go through them. One of the simplest explanations is relaxation. When a cat feels physically safe and relaxed enough to fall into a deep sleep, the purring can simply continue as an extension of that calm state, like a person sighing contentedly before drifting off. Purring may also work as self-soothing, just like a person might hum quietly to themselves or take slow breaths to relax. A cat's purr may help regulate her own mood and breathing pattern. This means the purring isn't necessarily about you at all. It might simply be your cat's built-in way of keeping herself calm, even while unconscious. Then there's habit and instinct from kittenhood. Kittens begin purring within days of being born, usually while nursing. It's believed to help them communicate with their mother in the dark, signaling, "I'm here, I'm okay." That early association between purring and safety appears to stay with cats for life. So when an adult cat purrs while sleeping next to you, in some sense, she may be echoing a habit that started in the first days of her life. There are also sleep transitions to consider. Cats don't sleep in one single uniform state. Like humans, they move through light sleep, deeper sleep, and REM-like phases. Purring often shows up specifically during these transitions, as a cat drifts from wakefulness into light sleep, or shifts between different sleep stages. It may act almost like an audio marker of the body settling down. And finally, there are hypotheses about possible physical effects of the purr itself. Some researchers have suggested that certain purr frequencies may have effects on the body, including possible effects on bones and tissues. This is an interesting area of study, but it's important to say clearly, this is still a hypothesis, not a proven fact. We'll come back to this in more detail shortly. So, when you put it all together, relaxation, self-soothing, instinct, sleep transitions, and possible physical effects, you start to see that a sleeping cat's purr isn't one simple thing. It's likely a mix of several of these factors happening at once. Here's something every cat owner should know, and it might change how you think about that sound. Purring doesn't always mean your cat is happy. It's easy to assume that purring equals contentment, because that's the most common association. But cats are also known to purr when they're stressed, frightened, in pain, or even while giving birth. Veterinarians frequently observe cats purring in stressful situations, like a visit to the vet clinic or while recovering from an injury. In these cases, the purring seems to serve that same self-soothing function we talked about earlier, except this time, it's helping the cat cope with something difficult, not something pleasant. So does that mean you should worry every time you hear your cat purring in her sleep? Not necessarily. Context matters a lot here. If your cat is sleeping peacefully, breathing normally, has a relaxed body posture, and is behaving normally when awake, then occasional soft purring during sleep is generally not something to be concerned about. It's most likely just a sign of comfort, or a leftover instinct playing out during rest. On the other hand, if purring is paired with signs like hiding, reduced appetite, limping, or changes in behaviour, That combination is worth mentioning to a vet, not because purring itself is dangerous, but because it can sometimes accompany discomfort your cat is otherwise trying to mask. There's also a specific type of purring worth knowing about, mostly so you can tell it apart from the sleeping purr we've been discussing. Solicitation purring. This is a purr many cats use while awake, often layered with a higher pitched, almost cry-like sound, typically used to prompt a person into action, feeding time being the classic example. Researchers have noted that this embedded high-frequency element can make the sound harder to ignore, in a way that taps into instincts humans have around distress cries. The purring your cat does while fast asleep is a different thing entirely. There's no request buried inside it, no higher-pitched layer aimed at getting your attention. It's simply the steady, low, continuous hum we've described throughout this video, with nothing behind it except your cat's own internal state. Knowing this difference helps make one thing clear: not all purring is communication aimed at you. Some of it, especially during sleep, really is just about your cat and nothing more. Now let's look at something different. Why the location of that sleep right next to you is actually meaningful on its own, separate from the purring itself. In the wild, sleep is one of the most vulnerable states an animal can be in. A cat's ancestors were both predators and prey, which means sleeping in the open, without cover or a lookout, was a genuine risk. That instinct hasn't disappeared just because your cat lives indoors with a full food bowl. Deep, exposed sleep, the kind where a cat rolls onto her side, stretches out, and lets her guard fully down, is generally reserved for places and company she trusts. So when a cat chooses to sleep pressed against you, on your lap, or curled into the crook of your arm, that choice of location is doing some of the same trust signalling work that purring does. The two often show up together simply because they're both responses to the same underlying feeling: it's safe to stop being alert right now. A cat purring while sprawled out and vulnerable next to you is telling a very different story than a cat purring while tensed up in a carrier at the vet. Same sound, different circumstances. Let's talk about what's actually happening in a sleeping cat's brain. Cats, like most mammals, cycle through different stages of sleep. Broadly, this includes lighter sleep and deeper, more active sleep, often associated with dreaming, sometimes called REM sleep. During REM sleep, cats show active brain patterns and may experience dream-like activity, although we can't know exactly what they dream about. You may have seen a sleeping cat's whiskers twitch, paws move slightly, or tail flick. These small movements are often linked to this more active sleep stage. Purring can continue through these different stages, and some researchers believe it may help smooth the transition between them, a kind of steady background hum as the cat's brain and body shift gears. It's tempting to imagine a cat purring through a happy dream, and while that's a nice idea, it's important to be honest. We don't have direct evidence of what, if anything, cats experience emotionally while dreaming. What we do know is that their brain activity during this stage looks meaningfully different from deep, quiet sleep, and purring often threads through it. You may have heard the claim that cat purring can heal bones or wounds. It's a popular idea online, and it makes for a great headline, but let's look at it more carefully. Some researchers have suggested that certain purr frequencies, often cited in the range of roughly 25 to 150 Hz, may have biological effects, including possible effects on bones and tissues. This idea is still being studied, and there isn't strong, conclusive evidence in cats specifically that purring accelerates healing. What's more established is this: purring appears to be linked to physiological calm, lower heart rate, slower breathing, and reduced stress. And reduced stress in general tends to support better recovery in most animals, humans included. So while cats have magic healing vibrations is an overstatement, purring may be part of how cats regulate stress, which can support overall well-being is a much more accurate way to put it. Interestingly, that calming effect doesn't stop with the cat. Low, rhythmic sounds like purring also tend to have a soothing effect on the human nervous system, similar to white noise or a steady heartbeat, which is part of why so many owners find it genuinely relaxing to fall asleep near a purring cat. It's a small reminder that the comfort in that sound isn't strictly one-directional. Quick curiosity break. Not every member of the cat family can purr. Small cats, including domestic cats, bobcats and cheetahs, have a throat structure built for this continuous in and out vibration. Big cats like lions and tigers have a different structure, built for roaring instead. As a general rule, a cat species can purr or roar, but not both, which is a reminder that purring is a very specific, always available piece of anatomy your cat inherited. One that can be triggered by many different internal states, not just one. For anyone curious about the mechanics, the purr isn't produced in the vocal cords the way a meow is. It comes from rapid twitching of the muscles around the voice box, controlled by a signal from the brain, opening and closing that space dozens of times per second as your cat breathes. That's why a purr can run continuously through both the inhale and the exhale, and why it can keep going even while a cat is fully asleep. It doesn't require the same conscious control that vocal sounds like meowing do. In a sense, it's closer to an automatic background process than a deliberate performance, which fits with everything we've already said about it showing up during rest, without your cat needing to be awake to produce it. It's also worth noting that purring frequency and style can shift slightly with age. Kittens tend to purr at a slightly higher rate, and very young kittens often purr almost constantly while nursing. As cats mature into adulthood, purring tends to become more situational, tied more closely to specific moments of comfort, request or stress, rather than being an almost constant background hum. By the time a cat reaches her senior years, some owners notice purring becomes even more prominent again, especially during rest, which some behaviourists associate with an increased reliance on self-soothing as cats age. None of this is a strict rule for every individual cat, but it does show that the sleeping purr you hear from your cat today may sound a little different than it did when she was a kitten, or than it will when she's older, even if the underlying reasons behind it stay largely the same. Individual breed can factor in too, though it's more anecdotal than strictly scientific. Ragdolls, for instance, have such a widespread reputation for purring often and easily that many owners jokingly call them purr machines. Maine Coons and Siamese cats are also frequently described by owners as especially vocal and prone to purring, sometimes alongside other sounds like chirps or trills. This doesn't mean quieter breeds purr less, because they're less content. It more likely reflects natural variation in temperament and vocal habits between breeds, the same way some dog breeds bark more readily than others, without it meaning anything about how happy they are. So if your cat seems to purr constantly compared to a friend's cat, breed tendencies may simply be part of the explanation, on top of everything else we've covered. Quick myth-busting round before we move on. 2 of these will be fast recaps. 2 will be brand new. First, a myth about volume. Purring can vary noticeably between individual cats. Some are almost silent purrers you can only feel through touch, while others are loud enough to hear across a room. Volume and frequency don't say much about how content a cat is. It's often just individual variation, similar to how people have different speaking volumes. Second, quickly, you already know this one, but it's worth a one-line reminder. Purring isn't a happiness switch, it's a self-regulating behaviour, so don't read too much into volume or frequency alone. Third, a myth about silence. Many cats sleep deeply and peacefully without purring at all. The absence of purring doesn't indicate discomfort, it simply means that behaviour isn't activated in that moment. Comfort can look like total silence just as easily as a soft rumble. And fourth, also brief, we still don't know the emotional content of a cat's dreams. So purring through a happy dream stays a nice guess, not a fact. Clearing up these myths matters, because it helps set realistic expectations. A sleeping cat's purr isn't a universal translator for her inner emotional state, it's one small piece of a much larger picture that includes body language, breathing, posture, and overall behaviour. To make this a little more concrete, let's walk through a few scenarios that cat owners commonly describe. You may recognise one of these from your own cat. The lap purr. A cat curls up on an owner's lap, kneads gently for a few seconds, and then drifts into sleep while still purring softly. This is a textbook example of relaxation-driven purring, layered on top of an old kittenhood habit needing itself, is a leftover nursing behaviour, and pairing it with purring as the cat settles down is extremely common. The sudden twitch and purr, a cat is sleeping quietly, then her whiskers twitch, her paw flexes slightly, and the purring either starts or briefly changes rhythm. This pattern is often associated with a shift into a more active sleep stage, the kind where brain activity increases and small involuntary movements appear. The post-play nap purr, after a burst of play, a cat settles down and purrs as she drifts off, likely just her nervous system downshifting from activity back to rest. And the purr that stops when you move, some owners notice the purring briefly pauses if they shift position or get up. Usually this just reflects a small momentary change in sleep depth, nothing more dramatic than that. None of these examples are definitive proof of a specific internal state, but they help illustrate just how tightly purring is woven into a cat's everyday resting behaviour, not as one single signal, but as a flexible tool that shows up in slightly different ways depending on the moment. One more practical thing worth knowing: not every sound a sleeping cat makes is actually a purr, and it helps to be able to tell the difference. A true purr is smooth, continuous, and rhythmic, the same steady vibration whether your cat is breathing in or out. Snoring, on the other hand, usually only happens on the inhale, sounds more like a short snort or rattle, and often comes from a cat sleeping in an odd head position, especially flat-faced breeds. Occasional snoring is usually nothing to worry about, similar to snoring in people. What's worth paying closer attention to is a raspy, wheezy or laboured sound that continues even when your cat is awake, and moving around that pattern is more consistent with a breathing issue than with normal sleep sounds. And it's worth a vet visit rather than something to try to diagnose from a video like this one. The simple takeaway: if the sound is smooth and constant, it's very likely a purr. If it's irregular, snorty, or seems to interrupt her breathing, it's worth keeping an eye on, rather than assuming it's the same comforting rumble we've been talking about. So practically speaking, what should you do the next time you hear your cat purring while she sleeps? In most everyday situations, the answer is simple: nothing. Let her sleep. Interrupting a deeply relaxed cat rarely does either of you any favours, and that purring is very likely just a sign that she feels safe enough to fully let her guard down around you, which, for a species that is instinctively cautious even in domestic settings, is a meaningful thing. That said, it's worth occasionally paying attention to the bigger picture. Is she sleeping in her normal spots? For a normal amount of time? Is her breathing steady and unlaboured? Is she eating, playing, and behaving normally when awake? If the answer to all of these is yes, then a purring nap is exactly what it looks like: a comfortable cat, resting well, occasionally letting out that same self-soothing hum she's carried since kittenhood. So, why do cats purr while sleeping? Most often, it may simply be because they're relaxed, comfortable, or using a natural self-soothing behaviour that has been with them since kittenhood. It doesn't necessarily mean they're dreaming about something specific, and it doesn't always mean happiness. But when your cat is sleeping peacefully beside you, breathing normally and softly purring, that little vibration is usually a beautiful sign that she's comfortable in her world. So the next time you hear that tiny rumble coming from your sleeping cat, don't wake her. Just listen. You may be hearing one of the quietest expressions of feline comfort.